Peace, how's it going? I hope you're doing well. It's very cold, even inside, so I'm going to wear my jacket during this vlog. And this vlog is probably going to ramble, probably going to be more than 10 minutes. I'll just warn you now. Uh, I had said before I wanted to talk about the secular nature of Japan and Japanese society and how kind of refreshing it is for me as an atheist to live here in a country that uh, is at once very steeped in religious tradition, but at the same time not governed or concerned with it on a daily basis. So first of all, we should get some basic facts out of the way and uh, some definitions perhaps. So secular is probably not a good word to actually describe Japan because secular means being apart from religion or not identifying with any particular religion. And while that's true in some aspects of Japan, you can't divorce Japan and Japanese life, especially Japanese cultural life, from certain religious traditions that are steeped heavily in either Shinto or Buddhism. But the interesting thing is, if you ask Japanese people, "Are you a religious person? Do you practice a religion?" Most of them will say no. Usually 70 to 80% say they have no religion. Only about 15% of Japanese people, when they did a poll in 2011, said they believe in a god, meaning, kind of like the Christian God, that type of, creator God. Um, and most don't affiliate themselves with any type of religion. I've got some statistics here, and just from Wikipedia, so who knows how exactly accurate they are. The non-religious in 2008, when they took a poll, was 50%, Buddhism 34%, Shintoism 3%. Now I'm going to get more to that in a minute. Christianity 1%, other religions 1%. Didn't state a preference or didn't answer the question, I guess 12%. Now there are offshoot religions, new religions as they call them, in Japan that are created that are kind of like what we in the West would call a cult. They're usually around some figure who prophesizes or is supposed to be in special communication with other supernatural forces. One terrible example of this is the Supreme Truth cult that put the toxic gas in the Japanese subways back in 1995. So there are these types of religions. There's very few Muslims in Japan, like less than 120,000, I think, according to one survey. Most of them are not native Japanese, but some are. There are very few, obviously, Jews in Japan. I think less than 2,000, according to one survey I just read. And they're mostly, of course, born elsewhere. Christianity, you've got some Catholics. I think the Brazilians that are, Japanese. And then, you've got your Protestants and, some other people. You will see the occasional Christian church as you go around Japan, even in rural areas. But the number here, the really low number for Shinto, is because Shinto, I think, is not something that Japanese people feel that they practice. Now, a long time ago, there was kind of three offshoots of Shinto. There was sort of rural Shinto. There was the imperial family had a version of Shinto, and they kind of combined all these, and it became the state-sanctioned religion for a while, and it became wrapped up in all the nationalism that occurred around World War II, and places that were taken over by Japan, you had to worship and go through Shinto rituals, and that all got the kibosh. The stop to that all happened at the end of World War II when Japan lost the war. America came in and occupied, and now in the Japanese Constitution there is freedom of religion. You're absolutely free to worship in any way you see fit. So Shinto there is a form of Shinto that you can, I guess, worship, although there is no one founder, there's no text, there's nothing like the Bible, there's no canon, of stories, etc. It's very much intertwined with Japanese mythology and, stories about Japan's past and how Japan was formed and how the Japanese people came to be, etc., etc. So, crash course, just in case you're not that familiar. Shinto is a religion that's based upon nature for a good part of it. They pray at festivals, Matsuri or Shinto festivals, for good harvest, taking care of the community, good weather, the health of the community, things like this. And they pray to kami, and kami are gods, and there are lots and lots and lots of gods. And there's some that are, you can find it in a tree. There's a fox god. There's the god of different things, like the god of marriage is one that's at Izumo Taisha, the shrine that used to be next to my apartment when I lived in Shimane. And these shrines have been around for many, many, many years. They're ancient and their traditions are long. And there's a common saying in Japan that you're born with Shinto and you die with Buddha. And it basically means that when you're born, there's a lot of significant Shinto rituals that happen in the life of a Japanese child. When you're very first born, you're taken to a Shinto shrine, and it's kind of like baptism, I guess, but just, you're prayed upon and blessings are given. And then there's the Shigo I'm trying to think. There's a festival that happens when you're like 3, 5, and 7, and there's a name for it, but I'm not going to remember it. And basically, on those birthdays, you'll see little Japanese children, and they're dressed up in like these special little mini kimonos, and it's really cute. And they're taken to shrines, and of course, the coming of age ceremony when the transition from childhood to adulthood at age 20 is also wrapped up in some Shinto rituals. So all during, your growing up period, there's a lot of Shinto stuff. And marriages, almost all marriages in Japan are overseen by Shinto priests. There's a lot of Western ceremonies involved too, but that's more just fashion and for fun. They don't really take it seriously, and you can even get jobs here as a Westerner being a fake priest, and saying the words of the Western ceremony in English and maybe in Japanese as well. And then it's like 90% of funerals are Buddhist ceremonies and are overseen by Buddhist monks, they chant. There's obviously different kinds of Buddhism. It started in India, and came to China, it came to Japan in like the 6th century, and there's different branches of it, but it's Mahayana, I think, Buddhism. And if I don't pronounce some of these words right, forgive me. But basically, all the Buddhism you've heard about, Zen, Pure Land Buddhism, these types of schools of Buddhism in Japan are kind of one branch that's centered in China, Korea, and Japan. And Buddhism is about giving away desire, trying to get to nirvana. But it's more of a philosophy, of course, than a religion, even though there is the Buddha, but the Buddha is simply the enlightened one. So it's not the same as praying to Jesus or praying to Allah or something. But anyway, you can look up Buddhism, you can look up Shinto and read, the simple Wikipedia definitions about them. I don't need to teach you all about them at this point. But there is more of a religious aspect to Buddhism, where you can study, you can learn to meditate, you can chant, you can go to temples and do religious practices with Buddhism. So about 30 or so percent, 30 maybe to 35% of Japanese people consider themselves Buddhists. But what prompted all this was my students were on a call, a conference call with a school in America. And of course, we talked about stereotypes, we talked about school life, and we wanted to talk about the meaning of life, like what gives your life meaning, you know, what do you hope to do in your life, etc. And of course, the American students, most of them, this was in a southern university, most of them were Christian, talked about God and religion, and when we talked about holidays, they talk about Christmas, and it's a religious holiday, right? Well, of course, they have Christmas here in Japan too, but it's not a religious holiday. And so some of the students, I think, were very confused by my Japanese students, in the sense that my Japanese students, like, what religion are you? And my Japanese students, don't really have an answer. They don't consider themselves any religion. They don't actively participate. There is no church on Sunday. There is no, it's just like how maybe you would separate yourself from others in America. Oh, he's a Christian, he's a Muslim, he's a Jew. They're just, everybody in Japan is Japanese, right? So, and I think they do a lot of these things unconsciously. I mean, they go to the shrine. We just had Oshogatsu, which is a huge holiday in Japan, New Year's, and probably rivaled only by Oban or Oban. And that happens usually in August. And Oshogatsu is very much a Shinto ceremony. You eat soba noodles on New Year's Eve for good luck. You adorn your house with these symbols of nature, the kadomatsu, and the thing with the orange, the mochi, and you eat special foods, and you go to a shrine. You don't go to a temple. Temple is Buddhism. Shrine is Shinto. You go to a shrine, Hatsumode, the first shrine visit of the year, and you pray for a good year, etc., etc. So it's very much a Shinto time. And then the other huge holiday in Japan, like I said, is Oban, and Oban is a Buddhist ceremony, or a Buddhist. You wouldn't call it a festival, and it's all about your ancestors. You go to the graves of your your grandfather, your grandmother, the people that have passed away in your life. You clean their graves, you make offerings, and Japanese people feel that their spirits will return for a short time, and they'll be able to commune with their past, their ancestors. And it's this kind of a ceremony. So, and that's really, Oban is when everybody goes back to their hometown. There's a huge outpouring of people from like Tokyo back to all the other parts of Japan where they came from. And the same thing happens at New Year's. So these are the two big holidays that are very significant in Japan, but one is Buddhist and one is Shinto. And it's just very interesting to observe them from, my point of view of never having grown up with all of this. And, I just find it all very fascinating. But I just am struck by how often, I'll be on Facebook. We just had a big election in America, and how, polarized people will be along religious lines about things like gay marriage and abortion and these topics. And a lot of it is influenced by religion. And I just don't think that ever comes up in Japanese political discussions. And it's very interesting. And yet there are some times where Japanese politicians will find themselves in complicated situations because of Japanese traditional practices. One very famous example is there's a shrine, not a temple, a shrine, that's dedicated to the soldiers that died in the wars, World War I and World War II, and perhaps wars even further back than that. So, God, I'm going to mispronounce it now, just off the top of my head. Yakasuni Shrine. Anyway, I'll put a link down below to it. And so it's always a big deal because Koreans and Chinese people, who don't even live in Japan, obviously, but they feel that some of the people that are enshrined and revered at at this one particular shrine are war criminals. Like they did terrible things in the war, and now they're being like worshipped and revered. So it's always a big deal. Will this prime minister, will the current prime minister go and visit this shrine? Because it has a lot of political ramifications. Not so much in Japan. I don't think anybody in Japan really cares that much. But other people in other countries care whether he goes or not. So that's interesting. You know, you look at these kinds of things and how it affects other people. And I just feel like it's just very, very refreshing to me. I just, when I open the paper, there's never this kind of political divide along religious lines. And, one of the girls asked, well, one of the girls in America, one of the students, when we were talking, she asked my students, well, what if you want to change religions? And my students were like looking at each other like, it just never has crossed their mind. Like, they're not religious really to begin with. And what religion would they change to? And I think she was kind of trying to be like, how it can be very, upsetting in America if you're a Christian family and, your son comes home and he all of a sudden says he's a Muslim, or, he wants to marry a Jewish girl and change to be a Jew or something. It just doesn't. I mean, everybody in Japan is Japanese. I don't know how many times I can say that, but it just doesn't really happen. And certainly, you can find maybe Japanese people who believe more strongly in some of these forces. But I think in general, I don't know that they're praying to anyone when they pray at the shrines. I think they're just sort of praying out into into life, into the spirit. Hey, world, I'm going to try to be a good person this year, be a good world back to me kind of thing. I haven't really asked people about it specifically, like what they're praying for too, when they go to the shrines. But it's, yeah, I just, I don't really think they consider themselves, I don't think they would say they were atheists. It's interesting. They would say they're non-religious, and yet they do all of these things. I'll ask any one of them, well, do you go to a shrine every year at New Year's? Oh, yeah. Do you have a little Buddhist altar to, like, your dead grandmother or somebody in your house? Oh, yeah. Do you light incense and stuff and, sometimes say prayer in front of that altar? Oh, yeah. And they're like, oh, okay. Do you clap your hands before you eat and say itadakimasu? Which is kind of like, sort of like saying grace. Oh, of course, I'm Japanese. But all these little things that they do, they're totally woven into their lives because they practice them and they've done them since they were a child, of course. But they don't consider themselves religious. And I don't know that they believe in a God. It's an interesting story, and I mean, I think you could obviously... if you come to Japan, you really want to find out about it. I don't think Japanese people are loath to talk about it. I just don't think it gets talked about very often. I mean, you would certainly never bring it up in just sort of casual conversation with people you don't know very well. Okay, well, this is almost 20 minutes. Now, I just wanted to talk about that, how, we just had a huge secular, well, we had a huge Shinto holiday here, Oshogatsu, New Year's. Huge deal in Japan. Everybody goes home to see their relatives. All my students are like, oh, I went over to my grandmother's house, or oh, yeah, I went back home and my mom did this, or we went to a shrine on January 1st. Of course, not everybody. I mean, people are busy. People skip it and stuff. Just like, even if you're Christian, you don't, and you get busy when you're maybe an adult, you don't do Christmas or something. But it really... But it's just sort of like, it's almost like a family tradition. It's kind of like Thanksgiving in the sense that, like, I mean, I really like Thanksgiving in America. I think it's a very inclusive holiday, whether you're an immigrant like my parents were to America, or you've been in America for generations. everybody can partake in Thanksgiving. You're basically just saying thanks for, the harvest, thanks for the wonderful food, thanks to my family and, my friends, etc. And I just think it's that kind of, spirit. It's not connected to any religion. Anybody can take part. And it feels like that in Japan. I mean, I have gone to shrines before with some, I guess, seriously Christian jets. And I've been, okay, well, let me show you how to do it. Here in Izumo Taisha, I would always take some of the new jets to Izumo Taisha. I'd be like, they don't clap twice and then bow and pray. They clap 4 times, twice for yourself and twice for the person you want to meet or want to marry. And I had one jet just say, I'm not going to participate in that. That's pagan. I'm a Christian. I only believe in Jesus Christ. And I just, I was like, okay, that's cool. I mean, I don't know what I'm supposed to say at that point. I mean, if you're not open to new things, I mean, I'm not saying you have to stand up there and pray. I mean, don't be false, I guess. But most ALTs and most jets and stuff, I mean, they go up, they throw their money in, and they take part. I just think it's part of the culture in a weird way, more so than like performing a religious act like taking communion or going to confession or something. I don't know what I could compare it to. So Japan is at once a very secular place. Religion will never come up day to day. Nobody will ever ask you. Nobody will. Well, they'll ask me because I'm a foreigner, maybe like, oh, do you celebrate Christmas? Or they'll just assume that I do because I'm from America. But it just won't ever come up. It just is not a factor here in day-to-day decision making. It's not even something I think you would probably need to worry that much about when you're dating a girl or dating a boy if you're, except that, I mean, I guess if they were into one of these new religions, one of these cults, or they were just really into Buddhism or something, maybe you would need to know about that. But yeah, I just, no family would be like, oh, he's a Buddhist? Well, we don't want, I think there's one quote in one of the articles in Wikipedia that I wrote that, nobody's ever been burned at the stake or anything in Japan because of, like in America or, the whole, Scopes monkey trials for evolution. And I mean, all that just must be seen by Japanese people as just silliness, an argument over nothing. So I think here, evolution is accepted for what it is, which is sound scientific belief. That abortion is legal. So it's just a very different country based on very different values. But at the same time, like I've said, you can't divorce Japan from its religious tradition, even though day to day it doesn't influence your life, especially as a foreigner living here, where you probably won't take part in some of these festivals, but maybe you will, and you should. You should try to at least take part and learn about them. So, all right, that's my talking today. 25 minutes almost. If you watch the whole thing, what should you put? Tell me in the comments whether you liked Skyfall or not. Which is going to be weird because I have all these comments about religion and stuff like that, but if you watch the whole movie to the end, or tell me, okay, don't tell me whether you like Skyfall or not. You can tell me whether you like Skyfall or not. Tell me who your favorite James Bond is. Just after whatever other comment you leave. Is it Daniel Craig? Is it, Pierce Brosnan? Is it Sean Connery? Who's your favorite Bond? And then I'll know you watched it all the way to the end. Okay, peace, guys. See you soon.